On today's show, the youth movement and veterans on the bubble as we head into the 25-26 season next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Caps as they head into the 2025-26 season. A bit different than we've seen in seasons before, where it does appear that the Capitals are going to be leaning into the youth, trusting the youth far more than we have seen in quite some time. So there are a lot of youth players, a lot of rookies that are looking for a job. Which of those young players are ready for prime time? I'll talk about that. And then a bit later, the veterans that are looking for their place. Now, listen, you've heard that Justin Sourdif is going to have a place on the NHL. You've heard that Declan Chisholm is going to have a spot on the NHL. It's my belief that the young players, the youth within the Capitals organization, are going to make it interesting. So let's get right into it here, talking about the Capitals and what we can expect in the 25-26 season, because like I say, I think that the youth, the Capitals, they're in the position now, something they've talked about. If you followed the team for a long time, when are they going to do that? When are they going to trust the youth? And year after year, it seems like they are, but then they acquire a bunch of veterans and you're like, okay, they're still going for the safe thing. They're trying to squeeze the most juice that they possibly can out of that rock the red era. But now I think the time is right. Alex Ovechkin, who is heading into his final year under contract, and the question that his future is a bit up in the air, right? I think that he has said that he doesn't know what he's going to do. I tend to believe that he is going to retire. So now is the time to integrate, to push along the youth within the organization. But there's not going to be any gimmies. We're not going to give a spot to a youthful player with a high trajectory just because of where they are. It is going to be a fair battle, and it's going to be a fun one to watch. But this camp, honestly, I think feels a little bit different. Leaning into the youth, that isn't just a token move like we did it. We're going to try out Leonard and Cristall. This isn't just one kid sneaking onto the fourth line for 7 minutes a night. This feels to me like an actual transition. And a lot of it, like I said, is born out of necessity. That, you can just keep kicking that proverbial can down the road again and again and again, and just getting veteran player after veteran player after veteran player. And that, in a lot of ways, is how the Capitals got to be such an old team at one point, or the Pittsburgh Penguins for that matter. That I think that the tendency is to go with the safe thing. And when I say safe, it's the guys that have the accomplishments. They got the trophies. They've got all the, awards that they've won throughout the season. But now it does appear that now is the time that they're going to lean into the youth. And Chris Patrick, instead of going out and grabbing some veterans, like we've seen in the past, it does appear that we're going to roll with the kids. Now, to be clear, we didn't kick Wilson and Carlson and Ovechkin on the team. It's just that you're seeing this integration, more of an integration than just like I said off the top, not that token move like, hey, we brought in that one kid that we're really hot on for years. No, I think we're going to see multiple young players. And I think that Chris Patrick is trusting the system, and he's trusting the development in Hershey. And that's a big thing. And it's not like he shouldn't. I mean, they accomplish great things year after year after year at the AHL level. And that's a big deal because the Capitals have known to be a veteran-heavy team for a long time. And that's the chatter out there, guys. I'm here to tell you, or it was anyway, was that the Capitals were old and slow. And, part of that might still be true, but I think they are transitioning away from that. So now with a little more cap flexibility And, what I'm going to say, a big picture mindset, it's clear Chris Patrick wants to see what the young guys can do. The perils of that, however, is say they're not ready. I don't think that he's dealing in that world right now. I think that he brought in veterans like Sourdif and Chisholm. And when I say veteran, I mean Sourdif is still he's still a young player, but he has some miles on his odometer. Still pretty ripe there. But you also have Sonny Milano. That you have guys like this. You have Ethan Frank. Guys that don't have, Sonny Milano in that breath has the most experience, but, Ethan Frank had a pretty good glimpse, a long sip of coffee, if you will, with the Capitals last season, that it's going to be a battle. So the top six, that's pretty much locked in. I don't think that's going to change a whole lot. Ovechkin, Strome, Wilson, McMichael, Dubois, Leonard, those names aren't moving unless someone gets hurt. You notice who I lumped in there? Leonard. Yeah, he's already a part of the pack. I really believe that, he's not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. His time with Boston College is over. We saw him in the latter part of last season, and I think that we're going to see him grow by leaps and bounds in the 25-26 season. And what do I have that based on? Just based on history. The guy is used to knocking it out of the park all the way up. We've seen him knock it out of the park at Boston College on the international stage. I don't believe that this is a flash in the pan. So where's the real action coming? It's going to be the bottom six. And the third line in particular, that's where the fireworks are going to be. Right? I think you've got Sonny coming back from an injury-riddled season. What the injury is, just vague and ambiguous, but trying to prove he's still got something left in the tank. And I don't think that we should dismiss him. I've kind of done it, not making the team, but that's just me. That's an extremely early take. I've seen the footage at MedStar. It looks like the best Sonny Milano that we've seen before. So a long shot, but you got to think that he is playing for his NHL future. And then you got a guy like Andrew Cristall. Yes, Andrew Cristall last season, where the Capitals were they didn't know what to do. Were they going to cut him from the team? They were talking about burning that first year of his entry-level contract, and he had to play a certain amount of games. Otherwise, it would eat up the first year. So they did the safe thing, and he went to Kelowna and then out to Spokane after that and just torched it. And big picture, the right thing. I have people I talk to on YouTube and Twitter, and they say maybe you learn bad habits playing in those teams. But I think what was important is he got a lot of playing time. He was not going to get a lot of playing time last season with the Capitals. I really don't think that's the case. And Hershey wasn't even an option. So Cristall, I think he makes the team. I think there's a distinct possibility. I'm saying early pick here, second line center. And like I said, he was right there last year, almost made the roster, dominated, but just wasn't there. And he's probably sitting there thinking, this is my time. Seize the day. I think it's the mindset of Andrew Cristall. Done the things he needs to do, hired a skating coach, bulked up a little bit, the things that he can address, he's done. Other players in the mix. Again, there's multiple battles. You want to keep it right here to Locked On Capitals. You have Ivan Mirshnyshenko and Henrik Lapierre. First, talking about Ivan Mirshnyshenko, he took his game to the next level last year in Hershey. He's had multiple sips of coffee on the big team with the Capitals, but the thing there, not sustainable. And if you're going to have a spot, if you expect to get a sweater each and every night, you need to bring it. You can't be hot. You can't be cold. I think this could be the season for Ivan. Question is, the hard part is there's only so many holes in the lineup. Can he kill it in camp? A lot of this is they're putting themselves in the driver's seat. And then you're talking about Henrik Lapierre, which we know signed that bridge deal. It's always going to be the season for Henrik Lapierre, but never really is. He was penciled in last season to be the third line center, not sustainable. But the good thing about him, and I don't want to just dismiss him and sweep him into the corner. What did he do? He did the thing he needed to do. He went down to Hershey. He got his game right. And that's big. Sometimes these younger guys, they'll go down there and sulk like, you know who I am. I don't need to do this. I think that he did the mature thing, and I think he's going to get an honest look at that third line center position. I know it's going to be a battle with Connor McMichael, but I think he's going to get a look. But as far as Ivan and Hendricks are concerned, both of them want to put the AHL in the rearview mirror. No more bus rides in Hershey. They want that NHL paycheck. And who can ultimately blame them? Those NHL minutes, both of those guys have skill. Both of those guys have the pedigree. Now it's about proving that they can handle the grind of the NHL every night. And not to be forgotten in all of this as well is Ethan Frank. Oh, yeah. You remember Ethan Frank? The guy with the need for speed, fastest skater in the AHL, put up big numbers for Hershey last season and made it to the Capitals. And all of a sudden, Ryan Leonard came to town and we're like, who? Ethan who? So I think that he is really going to have to do something to stand out and differentiate himself from the other players. He came up last year, brought speed, brought some energy, brought that forecheck, and yeah, he wants to play. But like I said, with Leonard, a bunch of new faces like Sourdif entering the mix, it's going to be an uphill climb for him. Not ruling him out. I think he's got a good skill set, but he is going to have to bring it. Here's the thing. Camp is going to be chaos. And I mean that in a good way, because this kind of competition, it's only going to breed success. It's only going to make the team better. You're going to see jobs every single day, every practice, every preseason game, every shift. They know what's at stake. Unless you are one of the players I listed off the top, like the Ovechkin, the Wilson, the Carlson, your job's not safe. I'm here to tell you that you're going to have to bring it. And if you're not ready to bring it, there is the next wave of young players sprinkled in with some veterans that are ready to swoop in. And for a team like the Caps that are trying to balance the present and the future, exactly the best, and the competition is going to breed success for the Capitals next season. I really do believe it. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about dark horses, some young players, and veteran battles straight ahead. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to Sundays. Now, listen, it's already easy. The Commanders are playing, or the Ravens, win-win. You know, there's some great football being played regionally. But if you want vested interest in all of the games, to make, if you're watching a Browns game, if you're watching a team that's maybe not revered as one of the better teams in the NFL, you can have vested interest in all of those games by opening up the FanDuel app, put a little money on the game. All of a sudden, they got that much more excited. So are you ready to play? You should be. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2, dark horses, the young players on the team that we've heard about for quite a few years. They made it to camp, but never, it didn't really work out for this or that. And then veteran battles. That is what we're going to dive into. There is a lot to get to. Thanks for sticking with me here. So let's dive into that in segment 2 here. And we're talking about the guys that aren't grabbing the headlines every day. They should be. If you're a Capitals fan, you should know. But could absolutely make some noise when camp opens. And first and foremost, not foremost, but in the mix of foremost, is Bogdan Trineyev. Big dude, 6'3", 202 pounds, plays a heavy game, blocks shots, kills penalties, wins puck battles. Now, this is a name that's circulated around the Capitals for quite a long time. And if you're not familiar with him within the Capitals, say you're a Bears fan, you know Bogdan Trineyev. He had 14 goals and 8 assists in Hershey last year. And then when the playoffs hit, 5 goals in 8 games. That is big production in big moments. And I think that, like I say, there is nothing written in stone that if Bogdan can bring it, if he can bring it in camp, he very well could make the team. That he's been rumbling in Hershey. The name is out there. And a prototypical capital as well. 6'3", 202 pounds, a big dude. That is the production in big moments that endear you to a team. That, when it's the playoffs, when it's the big lights, that speaks volumes for you. But before Justin Sourdif came over in that trade, there was the feeling that Trineyev might be the guy to play the fourth line. That was a thought out there anyway, right? That you start to kind of pencil in who is going to go here and who is going to go there. And you start to make connections. We saw that Mangiapane and Radish were off to the next one. And you started to see holes in the roster. And you're like, I wonder how that player would work there. So it's going to be interesting that, Justin Sourdif came in. I still think with Capitals fans, a bit of a head scratcher. He does have some good numbers to back him up, but I think that Bogdan's like, I don't care that you brought him in here. I'm going to fight. And now he's got competition. But here's the thing. You've got that kind of size, that kind of physical edge, and you can chip in some offense. You're always in the conversation. I think that if there's any of those guys that happen to be listening or watching this show, you're in it. As of right now, you're in it. Are there favorites? Of course, that's just the nature of things. You pick favorites on this or that, but you're still in it. If he has a big camp, he's going to make Spencer Carberry think long about where he fits. Speaking of other long shots, and maybe people already kind of had him penciled in as well, is Ilya Protas. Talking of another big guy, a prototypical Capital. That name should sound familiar. If it doesn't, well, because his brother, Alexei Protas, well, he plays with the Capitals, so he's not really little, I guess. But 6'5", 200 pounds, and get this, just dropped 50 goals and 124 points in the OHL. People would say, well, that's not, ECHL, AHL, or NHL, but still, 50 goals in the OHL is nothing to sneeze at. That's not a typo. 50 goals. Then he added 25 points in 12 playoff games. And if you ask Alexei, he thinks that he could be a strong contender to join the team. And if he followed the track of his brother, that he had the same thing. I remember back, Alexei was going to join the Capitals in camp, and everyone kind of like Bogdan Trineyev, and they're going to do their time, and then they're going to go down to Hershey. Oh, that wasn't the case with Alexei. So I think is it going to be a long shot for Ilya to join the team? Absolutely. Am I saying that it's impossible? Absolutely not. The kid can score big time. The only knock, his skating needs a little polish, but the hockey IQ, the vision, the playmaking ability, it's all right there. So if he's not ready, these guys are just simmering, they're marinating, they're working on their game, and Hershey could be a force that could force their hand and make them keep him longer than expected. I'm not saying it's likely, but it's not impossible either. Then another name that should sound familiar, I'm assuming that if you listen or watch this show that you are familiar with some of the prospects and young players, is Henrik Rybinski. Remember last year almost made the team out of camp where there was at least chatter of it. Went down to Hershey at a career high 35 points. Got his first NHL call-up in December, didn't play, but that says something. He's got the size, speed, he makes smart plays, and he's consistent. All positive attributes, and those are attributes in the AHL. How is that going to translate to the NHL? That's what the camp's about. That's what the preseason games are about. But for Carberry, an abundance of wealth, the kind of player you trust on your bottom six when injuries hit. So that's, I think, something to underline and circle back to as well. That if these guys, they're not all going to make the team. It's not like everyone gets a car, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. This isn't the Oprah show. It's some of these players are going to have spots. Some are going to go to Hershey. Some of these players might be waived, reassigned, whatever the case you might want to look. They're not all going to have a spot on the Capitals, whether it's the big team, whether it's down in Hershey, that kind of thing, that there is going to be winners, there's going to be losers. And I think that Hershey is going to be the biggest team that benefits, because like I say, all these teams all these players aren't going to make the big team. That I think Hershey's going to be a team to be reckoned with. And like I said, Ethan Frank, man, his story was wild. Started in Hershey, scored 20 goals in 35 games, got the call-up, played 24 games for the Cap, had 7 points. And when he was in the lineup, you noticed him. His speed, of course, the need for speed, torched Mr. Wheels of the AHL, his forecheck, his energy. But like I said, when Leonard signed and the roster tightened up, Frank disappeared into the press box with his fancy clothes. Didn't see him in playoff time. Couldn't go back to Hershey because he was not eligible. And I think the hope is there. And, you run into this all the time with different players that are in camp. I think we ran into this a little bit last year with Jacob Vrana. What a good story Jacob Vrana, remember Jacob Vrana, he's going to come back here and oh my God, this is going to be so great. And I know I'm not saying those two players are comparable, but what I'm saying is that there's been high hopes for Ethan Frank for a long time. But like I say, there's not going to be any give-me's. So these guys are going to have to bring it. He's got to bring something to stick around. Ethan Frank is kind of the guy that's, kind of like Sonny Milano getting lost in the mix. For me, it's going to be Milano, it's going to be Frank, and it's going to be Lapierre. Those guys are going to just need to bring their absolute A game. That is what I know for sure. There's more at stake for certain players, and I think some of the other players are almost resigned to the fact that they may get sent back down to Hershey. All right, so coming up here after the break, big questions and predictions straight ahead. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. That's the thing I love about it. See where you're spending your money wisely, where you could use some work, plan your financial future together with your significant other. I know you're going to love it. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Network team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. In the final segment of today's show, we're talking big questions and predictions. That's what when you do these shows, you got to kind of make big predictions. It is all part and parcel of doing a job like this. So that's what we're going to talk about in the final segment of today's show. So here's where things get interesting. Because with all this competition, somebody's going to get squeezed out. Let's start with Sonny Milano. I think, and I'm just going to lay it out here clearly, the best Sonny Milano that we've seen. A bit of a question mark on why he missed all of last season, save 3 games with this injury that we still can't really pin down. Last year was rough. Injuries, setbacks, only 3 games played. And when he was healthy, he didn't impress. -3 rating and got benched early on there. Not great, but now he's in the last year of his deal, and contract years generally bring out the best in players. Think Anthony Mantha, for example. Great season the last year as a Capital. The year before, not so much. So I think with Sonny Milano, if he wants to continue to rake in the big money of playing in the National Hockey League and not getting sent down to AHL somewhere, he's going to have to bring it. So what happens if he doesn't win a job? Does he go on waivers? Does he get traded? Does he go to Hershey? It's possible. And then there's the other guy, like I said, Henrik Lapierre. A lot of questions. So you take a look at Sonny.
what happens with him? I mean, do the Capitals envision him with a long-term plan with the team, or do the Capitals view Sonny Milano as someone that should get sent out on greener pastures? A lot at stake. Henrik Lapierre, another player, Calder Cup MVP in Hershey. The talent's there. The skill is there. It's about bringing it on the big stage in the National Hockey League. And can he finally grab a job in the NHL and keep it? There's a job. There is an open sign. There is a jobs wanted, or there is, inquire within posting for the third line center position that I think if he brings it, it's there. You can see a path to success for Henrik Lapierre. Will he seize the day? This is a make or break year for him when he signed that 1-year bridge deal. Connor McMichael, like I said, is the favorite. He's my favorite for the third line center, along with a lot of other people. But if Lapierre lights it up in camp, things could get complicated in a hurry. It could make things very difficult for Spencer Carberry and Chris Patrick about where do all these players go. I like them, but who do I like more? It's an ideal situation. It is it's one of those unique situations in life. I'll leave it at that. But what about Justin Sourdif? The Capitals gave up a couple draft picks for this guy. That tells you something. And that was the big head scratcher, because when you heard a move, you were thinking big name, marquee. You're following the NHL, right? That all these big names are on the move in the Capitals. They've got to do something here sometime. Justin Sourdif. And I want honesty here. Be honest with me. How many you had to go? Justin Sourdif. Google Justin Sourdif. 2 draft picks for this guy. And if you look into it, some pretty good upside there. Good skater. And what Chris Patrick said was that it was almost kind of like a bidding war, that there were teams that were offering up 1 draft pick, so they felt the need that they had to put 2 in. Is that deal going to pan out? Those are the big moves that are attached to Chris Patrick right now. He did not go out and make the marquee name. He did not reel in Nikolai Ehlers. Is Sourdif going to be worth the 2 draft picks? I guess, to be honest with you, they weren't upper end draft picks, but was it worth it? That is the question here. But he's versatile. He can play center or wing. He's quick, great hands, high hockey IQ. Center and wing, see where that could fit in? Third line, boop, boop. I think that is why they got him. So they're trying to plug holes in case there's any questions. Say the Connor McMichael doesn't fill it. Say Henrik Lapierre. They've got plans A, B, C, in some cases D. And here's the big thing. He'd have to clear waivers to go to Hershey. So I think he's here to stay, right, guys? I mean, unless they wanted to risk it. And given the fact that they gave up 2 draft picks, I don't think that is what they want to do. So they definitely pushed their chips in on Justin Sourdif. Is he going to be on the big team, or is he going to be a healthy scratch? It's be interesting. Not to say that it's impossible that the Capitals wouldn't do, waive him or something like that, but I think highly unlikely. They would have to see a glaring deficiency that Chris Patrick and the amateur scouts didn't see. It tells you they expect him to make the team. Last but not least, the blue line and Declan Chisholm, another guy. Oh, the Capitals got traded for Declan Chisholm. Wait, who? Google Declan Chisholm. Okay, and you take a look at his numbers as well. Why was he brought here? Depth on the blue line. The Capitals do not want to go into next season. They don't want to go into the playoffs with any question marks on the blue line. No more questions. Is Declan Chisholm going to answer all of those questions? That's a lot of weight to put on a guy's shoulders that I think most people had to Google search before he came here. The Capitals traded for him at the draft, signed him to a 2-year deal, probably penciled in as depth. And what do we know? Faravari is already, his knee is not 100%. So some question marks. But if he pushes hard in camp, if he takes a step forward, he could grab a spot on the defensive group. I'm going to say that's a long shot. So here's my bold prediction about who makes the team. Out of Cristall, Miro, Lapierre, and Sourdif, 2 of these guys make the opening night roster. My gut says it's Cristall and Sourdif, out of the players that I mentioned there. But if Lapierre lights it up in camp, watch out. And for veterans like Milano, this could be their last shot in DC. And when I say that, I think Declan Chisholm makes the team. I was just talking out of Cristall, Miro, Lapierre, and Sourdif, that I think it is Cristall and Sourdif. Miro, and I'm just basing that on consistent play. I think that Cristall did enough last season at lower levels to prove it. And, Miro, he does appear that he found his game last year, but sustainability. We've been sold the bill of goods on Miro before. Lapierre is a long shot. He signed the bridge deal. It's a long shot. Again, I don't have faith in a person until I have reason to have faith in them. So I think that he's a long shot. Again, I would like for the best option, right? I'm just making an early pick that it's Cristall and Sourdif out of those players that I listed there. But it's an early pick, right? And things are subject to change. The one thing I know for certain is that the Capitals, they're in a good position where it's the young talent. They've got young talent. I think they need to embrace it. This is going to be some fun hockey in 25-26. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL, as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.